they're actually right now in a $6 billion deficit as of July 31st of this year. So give us some background onto all of this as to where this money is going and what's going on with FEMA specifically.
Sure. Yeah, it's good to see you again, Brianna. So there's a lot of play here and honestly a lot of blame to go around. But the craziest thing that stands out to me is you mentioned they have that $6 billion deficit. But this audit actually came out just a couple months ago showing that they have $8 billion in funding basically lying around not being used because they've already promised it to victims of storms from 2012 or earlier. So you've got storms like Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy caused a ton of damage. Now, that money still hasn't been spent because the construction projects to recover from those hurricanes have been delayed so many years, and FEMA is not enforcing those deadlines. So they've just kept this money lying around, and now they're saying they can't use it to help victims of Hurricane Helene or all the other storms we've seen this season.
So, what would be the benefit for FEMA to hold on to that money rather than releasing it? Because it doesn't sound productive. It doesn't sound like it's helping Americans at all.
Right. They're basically just not being strict enough with their deadlines. So they set the deadline originally. They said, okay, you have until, say, 2020, 2021 to spend this money, use it to recover from the storm. When that doesn't happen, instead of saying, okay, too bad, you took too long, now we're going to take the money away, they just award deadline extensions based on what auditors say working for FEMA are subjective criteria. So they say, okay, now you can have until 2030 to spend this money. It's fine. So it just keeps sitting around in these government bank accounts, not being used to help anyone, not going towards Helene, just a number on a piece of paper, pretty much.
Yeah, and that's definitely problematic and shouldn't be taking place in the first place because, Americans have to recover, and it should be. I mean, it's the government though, but it should be quick and efficient. But again, the government. What else are you learning about their spending that might be called into question in all of this?
So those deadline extensions I mentioned, $4.5 billion of that is just for Hurricane Sandy. But then if we go over to their COVID spending, that's another number that kind of would erase this deficit they're talking about. So COVID, a big part of the reason they're so underfunded now is when the pandemic began, they really had no sense of how much money this was going to cost. I don't think anyone did, so I'm not sure we can fault them for that. But they went and told Congress, okay, it's going to cost us $18 billion to recover from the pandemic. That was completely wrong. It ended up costing them around $200 billion. But they already made their budget request to Congress based on those underestimated numbers. So Congress didn't give them enough money. And as the cost from COVID kept piling up and piling up, they just ran out. And now it's like they're just treading water, trying to catch back up to all that funding they should have gotten in the previous years, but didn't because they underestimated how much they would need.
Yeah, it sounds like little errors here and there, but I mean, they're asking for more money, and like you've stated, that they just kind of have the money sitting in accounts right now. Do you think FEMA's overreaching based on the numbers that you've looked at by continuing to turn to Congress and say we need more money, even though they have the money ready on the books? Is there any way that they could reallocate that and use that currently?
I mean, reallocating it is much easier said than done. The easiest solution would have been just managing it properly in the first place. It would take a lot of executive action to move that money around at this point. But the easiest thing to do is just stop approving new expenses and curb some of the spending. They're saying they're only approving life-saving activities right now for Helene, but at the
Yeah.
same time, they're still spending on the pandemic, which is over. They've spent about 110 billion so far on the pandemic. They say they plan to spend another 60, 70 billion more. They set a deadline last November 2023. They didn't stick to it. They're still approving more applications from people saying they were hurt by the pandemic. They're spending that money while telling hurricane victims, sorry, we don't have enough for you.
Yeah, that's infuriating to hear that. And I know you guys probably haven't done enough in the way of looking into all of this because it's relatively new regarding illegal aliens and kind of FEMA using our money to go towards border related issues, is how they're putting it right now. FEMA's denying that they've done this, but we have the proof. I mean, it's all in their press releases, and we've got that on their screen right now. They've been talking about over $1 billion in funding being given out to anything related to the border in regards to shelter for these illegal migrants and all of these other issues that are going on right now. Do you guys have any data in regards to illegal aliens and the money that's being used by FEMA on them?
We haven't looked into it a ton yet, but I can tell you, even that $1 billion, I mean, when you're talking about a 6 billion deficit, it's really a small number in context. They have much more cash just lying around. So I mean, that's definitely an important piece of it. And I
Mm.
mean, it's definitely just pretty much up to viewers' opinions whether you think that's an expense that should have been approved in the first place or not.
Yeah.
But regardless, there's just so many different factors at play here. So when you add it all up, that's where it really all comes together for this deficit. They ran into a deficit last year too, last summer. It's not like this is a new issue. They've known for about a year now that they were probably going to run out of money around this time. And instead of doing anything about it, they kept approving money for illegal aliens, money for COVID. And that's how we got into this situation.
Yeah, yeah, and it's going to be a painful process to dig our way out of all of this because Americans need access to that money when there's tragedy that occurs, and so this should be a top priority. Jeremy, I want to thank you and everything that Open the Books is doing. I know you guys are looking into all of these great issues, and you guys continue to call out these federal agencies that are mismanaging their funds, and so we greatly appreciate it when you do so. So thank you for joining us again this week.
Yeah, we appreciate your support, Brianna. Thanks for inviting me.